We're going to make any panel or any design into an adorable pillow. It's going to look really professional. We're going to put a zipper in it, and we're going to start off with making these with using a panel, a pre-printed panel that is a square. And this is a beautiful design by Ann Kelly. First thing we're doing is we're cutting apart the panel and we're cutting it up into the segments. And as you can see, that these are squares that I'm going to use. A lot of times quilters want a piece around them. I'm going to show you how to make this so that we're not piecing around it. We're going to applique them. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check how square this really is. And as you can see, when I put that square ruler on there, there are a couple of the points that stick out kind of funny. So if I pieced around this, I'm going to lose some of my design. So you can see when I try to line that up in the corner, it makes it cattywampus. So I can't count on this being perfectly square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some measurement. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'm going to measure like a 1/4 of an inch away from that green frame to get my applique ready. So on this first one, I'm only going to cut one, and I'm going to cut it a 1/4 of an inch away on all the sides of it. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm going to make this a turnover. So I'm not going to make it a 1/4 of an inch so I can piece to it. I'm going to turn that edge under for applique. And if you notice on the very bottom, this was the end of the bolt, and so there wasn't much left, so I don't even have a full 1/4 in the whole thing. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to work around that. And there we go, there's my first one, and I measured a 1/4 of an inch away. Now I went to the ironing board and I used my ruler, my hot hammer, and I put it underneath there, and I went up to the 1/4 of an inch, and I turned it under. And then I went and did the opposite side. And if you notice on that side, I didn't have that full 1/4 inch, but it still turned out fine. And then I do the left and the right. So when I line that up against that, I'm sending in the 1/4 inch, and then I press it right onto that ruler. That's what's cool about the hot hammer ruler, is it can help me measure, but I can also iron something really square. Now again, when you look at it, I put that ruler on there, it's still not square, but it's even. And that's what I want, is I want to use that frame. So let's go to the next one. We're going to cut this next friend out. Now in this one again, I don't have that 1/4 inch on the bottom because again, it was the end of the bolt. And again, it's not square. It's a little better than my last one was, but it's still not square. So what I'm going to do is I could line this up in here, and this time I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to give myself a little bit more space around the outside edge. In fact, I'm going to cut 1/2 of an inch away, so it gives me a little bit more grab. I'm going to have to deal with that bottom section. It's going to be a little shy. I'm going to go with my hot hammer ruler. I'm going to turn it under that 1/2 inch, the 1/4 inch first. And if you notice, when I turned it under that 1/4 inch, it left a big frame around there. Now I want it to be trimmed down a little bit more, so I'm going to get it trimmed all the way down so I actually have a 1/4 of an inch around there. And now I went ahead and I turned all those edges under. Now notice those little corners peek out just a tiny bit. I could go in and I could trim it off. This is only a 1/4 of an inch trimmed around this, or pressed under. I could also trim those little points that are peeking out. Probably not the best practice, and I'll show you some other ways to deal with that. But I have the edge turned under 1/4 inch. This is typically how I did this. And then it occurred to me, I really don't have to make that 1/4 of an inch. I could make it a full 1/2 inch. I could make it a full 1/2 inch. So now as I look at these, I have those little points sticking out. I could trim those out, or I could tuck them under a little bit more. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to tuck them under a little bit more. If you look at these two, they're ready to go. They're ready to be appliqued. But I'm going to go through and do the rest of them. And now, because I have a 1 inch in between the two spaces, I'm going to cut around all of these a 1/2 of an inch. If you notice, I don't have that conflict with that edge that was cut a little bit short on the outside piece of it. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut a full 1/2 inch around this. It's going to make it a lot easier to turn that edge under with the hot hammer ruler for applique, because I'm turning it under for applique. So I'm going to slip through and I'm going to cut the 1/2 inch around all of these. The tricky part about doing this, like I said before, is if you're a piecer, we have a temptation to want to not square, because that is how panels run sometimes. So I'm just cutting that 1/2 inch away from the edge on all of these. So I'm cutting 1/2 of an inch away. I'm going to be turning that under, pressing it with my hot hammer ruler, and then we're going to go back to applique. Now when we talk about applique, usually people think of zigzag stitches. Applique can be done with a straight stitch. I'm going to do it with a blanket stitch as well, and that's another way to do this. And so we've got our next one. It was a whole lot easier to press this one under, and if you look at the back on it, when I pressed it, I did the 1/2 inch on the sides, I did across the way, then I did the top and the bottom. Now I also took my Annie's Tailor's awl, and then what I did was I tucked that corner that was sticking out a little bit. I tucked it under, and that Annie's Tailor's awl, I was able to iron right over it, and it works really, really well. So that is really square and beautiful. Now I'm going to take my background fabric, and I have a 1/2 yard of background fabric. Now what I want to do is I want this motif centered in the middle of a square of fabric. And so the thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to line it up with the square, and on the back of this I put some Decker Bond, because when you looked at it before you could see those little light bulbs were shining through. So I put a layer of Decker Bond on the back of my motif so that now you can't see the light bulbs coming through. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim out my fabric to an 18-inch square. So I've laid it down on my cutting mat. I'm cutting to measure to make sure I've got 18 inches, and so I'm going to slice off the 1/2 yard, an 18-inch piece. Then I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to keep cutting it into the 18 inches. Now for this is not like quilting where I have to have it incredibly accurate. I can use my cutting mat to measure that 18 inches. And what I like about this is I scooched it over a little bit so that I could get those measurements square. So at this one I'm cutting at 28 inches, and then I was able to move over here and cut it at 10 inches and get it squared up. Now notice that applique in the middle is not positioned down. I'm going to show you how to get it perfectly square in the middle of that piece. Now I have this as an 18-inch square, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chalk liner, and I'm going to draw a diagonal from one corner to the next using my really long ruler. If it's not long enough, you put another ruler next to it, bump it up against it, and it works out great. So again, I'm going to draw this line. So now when I go to put the motif down there, the 4 corners of my motif are going to line up with the diagonals in there. So I can position it in there, and it's perfectly square in the middle of that piece. So it's an 18-inch square, and then I've got my little motif on there. It wouldn't matter what size I did it. That's how I would square it up to make sure it was in the center, the exact center. Now these designs would work really well to put them off center too, because as you can see, that background fabric is fascinating, and it would make a really great motif even if it was set cattywampus or a little bit off to the side. So the first thing I'm pinning is I'm pinning the outer corners because I can see where those match up with my points. I'm putting a few more pins on them, and then I'm going to go to my sewing machine. This is the time that you want to go to your stash of variegated threads and do your applique in that. And I actually used a hand-dyed thread from England when I did this. So when I came back, as you can see, I have that Decker Bond in the back of my motif, but I also have the ability to go in with my applique scissors, and I can remove just that backing fabric so that I don't have any of that shining through my motif. So I did a little snip to get started. You want to be very careful when you do this, but my applique scissors are perfectly designed for this. Applique scissors are designed so that when you do your cutting, you're only cutting through the top layer, and there's a guard on the sides of the scissors that prevents you from cutting into, say for instance, the stitches that I have around there or the other fabric. And so what I've now revealed, when I put this on the back of my applique piece, remember I put a piece of Decker Bond, and that's it makes a decorator weight fabric out of pretty much any fabric. So now I have that opening. I can't see any of those little light bulbs through that back, and I can set that fabric aside. Easy peasy. Great way to use a panel. We don't think of this that often. Now let's look at the back of the pillow. So on the back of the pillow, when I go to put this together, all I'm going to have to do is I am going to install a zipper in it, but I'm going to turn it over. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to make a slice in the fabric so that I can install the zipper in there. And when I choose this, one side I'm going to turn under 1/2 inch, and the other side I'm going to turn under 1 inch. And then we get a fold over lap that covers our pillow. Brown fabric is fascinating, and it would make a really great motif. So what we're going to do now is I've got it all appliqued on there, and I'm going to turn it around to the back, and we're going to take a little snip in there, because what I want to do is I want to remove that backing. I don't have to, but I do want to remove it because I don't want it to shadow through the snow on the front of the motif. So what I'm doing is I've done a little snip with my regular scissors. I've gone and grabbed my applique scissors, and what I love about applique scissors is they give me a chance to protect my fabric while I'm cutting around those pieces. And so my fabric underneath is not getting cut away. I'm just cutting away this background fabric from behind the motif, so that when the design is in there, the only thing that'll go behind it is the pillow, so that white won't have to be fighting with these cute little ornaments. So now I have everything ready. Looks really good. So I'm going to pull out my backing fabric. This is going to be the back of my pillowcase, and it's going to be the part that I will be installing a zipper in. Again, I started with ½ yard, so it's 18 inches. I had trimmed down my pillow front to 18 inches, and so I'm laying it out on here. Now, when I look at this, I have to install a zipper in this, so I'm going to do a slice down around where it's about the middle of where that fabric is going to be. If you notice, I didn't cut off the fabric to my right, because I'll be able to trim that out later on. So I'm going to be turning the left side under by about ½ inch, and the right side I'm going to turn it under 1 inch. And we're going to be installing a zipper that is going to be concealed by the flap that we put over the zipper. Now all I had was a purple zipper, but this is going to be entirely covered, so I'm cool with that zipper is going to be revealed. Now if you notice the top of the zipper is longer than what I need, and so what I thought was, well, what would happen if I additioned it? This is going to be about an 18-inch span. What if I only put a 9-inch zipper in there? If I put a 9-inch zipper in there, it's going to be really hard to get that pillow in there. So I'm putting in a zipper that's about 22 inches, I believe. So I'm not going to use the whole zipper, but I'd rather have it too long than too short, because I have tried to put 9-inch zippers in these, and it's really hard to get in there. If you notice, look at how tiny 9 inches. So I'm going to be putting a full stuffed 17-inch pillow form inside of this. That's going to be really hard to navigate in there. So the first thing I did was I did my hot hammer ruler. I turned one side under ½ inch, I turned the other side under 1 inch, and I did my pressing. So when I turn it over, I'm going to see that the one side is for the shorter side of it, and the one side is for the flap, the lap over that it's going to be putting in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch my zipper in there with my zipper foot, and I place that zipper with the edge of that ½ inch right alongside of the tape. I don't want the teeth to be too close where they'd catch, but there's a little line that you can see on a zipper, and that's about where I'm aligning it with. So I'll be using my zipper foot, which means I'll be changing my needle position over. I'm going to put black thread both in the top and the bottom of my machine, because I am going to be doing some stitching from the back, and then I want to make sure that that's black. Now I'm not going to install my zipper so it goes all the way to the bottom, because I'm going to be creating a flanged pillow out of this. So I'm going to stop at about 3 inches above the bottom. And then when I go to do the other side, let's turn it over and show you what that's going to look like. So on the other side, once I get the one side installed, then the other side, I'm going to install the edge of that zipper tape right next to the hem line, not the fold, but the edge of the fabric, all the way down, and it automatically creates that overlap. So now I have the first side in there, and then I'm turning it over, and I'm going to do some pin basting from the back to get that zipper in there. Now you can see the top of the zipper is a little bit down from the top of it, and the top of that zipper is going to be fitting into that space. Chatting with my friend Carmen while I'm on the phone, and I'm using the phone to hold down the weight of it. Oh, isn't that adorable? Yeah, that's what phones are for. They can be weight for you. Okay. Boy, that phone's doing its job. So I'm pin basting. All I'm doing right now, though, is I'm just pin basting it. Okay, because I just want to show you how this is going to work. Now though, as I'm just pin basting it. Now, pin basting those pieces in there, I've pin basted it from this side, and I want to make sure that you can see what exactly is going on here. So I pin basted it all into place, and I want you to see that, you see how much longer that zipper is than I need it to be? I don't want that zipper to go to the edge because I'm creating a flange on this pillow. So when I sewed the zipper in on the one side, I decided at a point down below towards the bottom of it where I wanted the zipper to stop, and I sewed over the zipper tape when I sewed the first one in. So when I sewed that first side in, I sewed over it like 4 times, and that's where I decided I wanted to stop. I've made this before where I've left that zipper tape in the flange, and it works, but it's not pretty. So I decided that I was going to stop right about there, and so I don't need all of this in there like that, because I'm not going to sew all the way to the bottom. So I'm going to be doing a sew, and then I'm going to be turning, but I want to get rid of that zipper tape. Get rid of that zipper tape. So I have it all sewn into place now, and you see where that zipper tape is down there below it? I have sewn across it at least 5 times. So I'm going to clip it off right there, remove it, then I'm going to turn it around to the front. Now when I did this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sew up, and then I'm going to sew to my left to cut that off. So the zipper's all installed now. I have it sewn, I have a horizontal sewn on the top and the bottom. Look at how nice that zipper works. And you don't even see that it's purple except for when you unzip it. Now, I'm going to take the front of my pillow cover, and if you notice on the back of that opening is still there. I'm going to fuse down either a layer of Decker Bond, or I will tell you I put fusible fleece over the top of this, because I really want those corners to fit together really, really well. So I first unzip the back of the zipper down so that I can open it up later on. I've gone ahead and I've fused a fusible fleece on there. Decker Bond would work terrific here too, but I chose fusible fleece because I had some. And then I'm going to pin baste it all the way around the outside edge. And if you notice, I am not going to trim it out. As long as my backing is bigger than my square, I don't have to measure the other one to make sure it's 18 inches. I'm just going to trust it, and I'm going to use the front of it to define what size this is going to be when it's done. So now that zipper is open. I'm ready to go to the sewing machine. That zipper's open. I keep reminding you of that because you don't want to do this. I went ahead and sewed 1/4 inch around the outside edge, and then I'm taking my rotary cutter and I'm trimming off those bigger pieces because it's really easy to see which ones are a little bit bigger. So I have very little waste of fabric on this. I do not trim out my corners with my rotary cutter. I leave that to my scissors, and when I do that, I don't trim really close to that seam line. I just trim like a V at a diagonal for the two of them, for the two sides, so that when I turn it inside out, it's a nice sharp point. Now, as I turn it right side out, I'm going to be pushing those corners out just a little bit, and I can tell you already I'm really loving this fusible fleece from OESD for the front of that. It really made it nice, and so then I'm gently tucking out all those points with that beautiful point-to-point turner. I'm going to close my zipper on this, and then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to use the other end of the point-to-point turner. So I've got all my points pushed out. Now I'm going to take this, and this, I like doing this not at the ironing board. You know how when you get those fabrics tucked in underneath there, and it kind of creates a pleat in the outside edge? I'm pushing that out, and then I'm pressing it down with the Hera end of the point-to-point turners. So this is the end that can make a really nice sharp crease. So I'm working all those edges out by tucking my fingers inside of that seam. The seam is not open, but I'm tucking it in and making sure I have it pulled out as much as is possible. And then that way, then I'm using that point-to-point turner to sharpen that up. So when I go to the ironing board, I'm not pressing pleats into the outside of my pillow. And again, I love this fusible fleece. It worked really, really well, way better than I was hoping it wouldn't be as good as the Decker Bond, but it's a great finish and it's perfect for this. I could have quilted it too. Now at this point I've ironed it really good, and so I've gone ahead and gotten my pillow, and I measure my pillow, and it's 16 inches. Now when I go to measure my pillow covering, it's 17 inches on one direction, and it's about 17 1/4 inches on the other direction. I want to create a flange in here, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my chalk liner and I'm going to mark all the way along the outside edge. I'm going to mark it 1 inch away from that outer edge. And when I do this, I'm sewing this so that my pillow isn't just the pillow coming to the edges. Now, if I'm working with a 16-inch pillow and I don't want a flange in there, I want that about 15 inches. Well, lo and behold, by taking 17 inches and removing 1 inch from each side, I'm taking the the size of that opening down to 15 inches, and I'm using a 16-inch pillow form and putting it in there. I like a really dense pillow because I like that it goes out to the corners of the pillow. It's probably the biggest distinction between a handmade pillow and one that's bought, at a home decorating store. You get a nice full pillow in there, and it just really accentuates the design. So now I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew right along that edge. Now if you notice, I've got a paintbrush, and the paintbrush, I'm removing the rest of that chalk. I could use the back side of that chalk liner, but a paintbrush works really, really well. So now what I'm going to do is I love that the zipper is in the middle, so I'm going to get about half the pillow into one side. I'm sticking my fingers in really deep to get those corners out to the corners. It will work its way in there eventually if you have a good pillow form, and we're carrying some really nice ones at Inspired so that they can be used over and again for other things. Now the other thing that I love about this zipper installation that we have in the back of this, I'm getting that pillow tucked in there as far as I can. But to work it in the rest of the way, what I can do is I'm going to put my hand in there so that zipper doesn't catch on the back of the pillow. And then look at that beautiful lap over. So it's totally not revealing, what the zipper underneath. So there we go, voila. Isn't she a beauty? Doesn't take very much time. Once you get on a roll with these, you're going to be making a lot of fun ones. And this is a great technique to use. You could have had piping, rickrack, so many other things. I can't wait to see what you sew out with your pillows, because I know you have lots of started quilting designs, lots of started embroidery, even panels. This is a great way to have fun, and what a great way to make something that's unique for your family members, yourself, your friends. I hope we inspire you to sew more and more every day.